Hi, friends. Tonight, I invite you to drift back with me to the autumn of 1914, when Europe trembled beneath the thunder of marching boots and the echo of drum beats calling young men to the front. Our story asks a simple yet unsettling question. Could you survive as a German soldier in the Great War? Let us slip gently into this distant world and walk, for a while, in the heavy boots of a young man who has yet to taste the mud and fire of the trenches. Your name for tonight shall be Johann Adler, a name as common in the rolling hills of Bavaria as the sparrow upon the barn roof. You are 19 years old. Your father is a cooper who binds barrels for the local brewery. Your mother tends the small vegetable garden behind your timber-framed home. Until recently, your life was measured in seasons of planting and harvest, of village dances and Sunday sermons, and the creak of your father's wagon wheels on the cobblestone street. But the old order has cracked open. On a summer morning not long ago, the postman arrived at your family's gate with a letter bearing the imperial eagle. The words were formal, yet unmistakable. You have been called to serve Kaiser and fatherland. Your father tried to hide the tremor in his hands as he unfolded the summons. Your mother wept softly in the pantry so you would not see. But you did. And so you stand now on the station platform of your modest town, a stiff woolen uniform scratching your neck, a leather satchel at your feet, a rifle you have never fired slung awkwardly over your shoulder. Around you gather other young men just like you, farmers, blacksmiths, clerks, students. Some grin and boast that they will be home by Christmas, medals pinned to their chests. Others stand in stiff silence, their eyes darting to the older veterans who have come to see them off. These men, the gray-bearded reservists, wear their faded Pickelhaube helmets like relics from another century. You catch your reflection in the station's glass window. You hardly recognize the soldier staring back. The uniform does not fit you yet, in more ways than one. Beneath the polished buttons, your heart beats too fast. You wonder, though you will not admit it aloud, will you come back wearing this same uniform? Or will someone else carry it home, folded neatly in a box, with a medal pinned to an empty sleeve? The train arrives with a shriek of steam and the hiss of iron wheels on the track. Mothers wipe tears from their cheeks. Fathers clasp your shoulders with stiff pride. You climb aboard with your satchel, finding a seat beside a boy you vaguely know from the next village. His name is Otto, and he shows you a photograph of his sweetheart, tucked into his pocket like a talisman against death. The whistle blows. The platform drifts past the window, and with it your childhood fades into smoke and distance. The countryside rolls by, fields turning to forests, forests giving way to small towns. At every stop, more boys in gray join you. Some sing patriotic songs, their voices ringing in the wooden carriage. Others stare at the floor, tapping their boots in restless rhythm. A sergeant, his mustache bristling like a badger's fur, strides down the aisle and barks reminders about discipline, about loyalty to Kaiser Wilhelm, about glory and sacrifice. Night falls as the train rumbles on. You lean your head against the rattling window, lulled by the steady clatter of the wheels. You dream of your mother's garden, the smell of damp earth, the hum of bees in the hedgerow. But then the whistle shrieks again, jolting you awake as the train slows. This is your first destination, a training camp in a place you have never seen before. You step down onto the gravel platform, boots crunching in unison with 100 others. The sergeant snaps commands. Luggage is tossed into carts. You march in a long, winding line beneath gas lanterns that flicker in the autumn wind. The camp rises before you. Rows of low wooden barracks, the dark shapes of officers moving like shadows between them. Somewhere beyond, you hear dogs barking, and the faint roll of distant thunder that might be cannons, or might just be the weather. Inside the barracks, you find your bunk, rough boards with a straw mattress that pricks your skin through the blanket. You lay out your kit just as you were told, every item in its place. The sergeant paces the rows, inspecting each man's pack and boots. One boy has forgotten to shine his brass buckle. He earns a shout and a shove that rattles the boards beneath you. That night, sleep comes slowly. The barracks are filled with coughs and whispers, the rustle of straw, the low rumble of snores. You clutch your blanket to your chest and stare at the rafters. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. The drills, the shouting, the endless lessons in how to march, to shoot, to fight. You wonder how long before the train comes again to carry you farther still, to Belgium or France, or the Eastern Front where the snow already falls. For now, though, you are here in a wooden bunk beneath a cold roof, wearing a uniform that still feels like a costume. You do not know yet what it means to live as a soldier. You certainly do not know yet what it means to die as one. And so you lie awake, Johann Adler, a young man from Bavaria with more questions than answers. Somewhere in the dark, a clock ticks towards dawn, towards the first roll call, towards the long road ahead. Sleep now if you can. For tomorrow, your real training begins. The gray dawn slips through the narrow barracks windows long before your eyes are ready to open. A sharp whistle cuts the stale air, and you jolt upright on the straw mattress, still tangled in your coarse blanket. Around you, the other boys scramble from their bunks, boots thudding onto the wooden floor, the sour scent of unwashed bodies mixing with the sharp tang of oil from the rifles stacked neatly at the end of each row. Outside, the camp reveals itself under a low sky heavy with drizzle. Rows of squat barracks stretch like ribs along a muddy path leading to the parade ground, a flat expanse of churned soil where a dozen squads already stand stiff-backed in formation. Sergeants stride among them, barking orders that crack like rifle shots across the chill morning air. You pull on your uniform with fumbling fingers, tugging at the stiff collar that scrapes your neck raw. Otto stands beside you, his eyes wide and rimmed with sleeplessness. He tries a smile, but it dies quickly as another whistle calls you both to the door. Together, you step into the pale light and join the river of young men flowing toward the parade ground. There, the first lesson begins, not with rifles, but with feet. You are taught to march, heel to toe, arms swinging in precise rhythm, heads high, back straight. When one boy falters, the whole squad repeats the movement again and again until each misstep is hammered out like a dent in armor. Mud cakes your boots. The drizzle seeps through your coat, settling a damp chill in your bones. Yet you march, and march, and march. Between the drills, you learn the language of the army, the snap of commands, the click of boot heels, the silent glances that pass between comrades when an officer's back is turned. You are issued a rifle, the Gewehr 98, long and heavy in your young hands. Its bolt clatters when you open it, the steel cold against your palm. An old corporal with a voice like gravel shows you how to clean it, oil it, load it. He repeats the lesson until your fingers ache and black grease rims your nails. At midday, you line up at the field kitchen, a steaming cauldron that dispenses ladles of thin soup and stale bread. You stand in the drizzle, bowl in hand, boots sinking deeper into the churned muck. Around you, boys whisper about home, about mothers and sweethearts, about fields left unplowed and livestock waiting for feed. Some wonder aloud when they will finally see action, their voices half brave, half fearful. Others say nothing at all, staring instead at the pale clouds drifting overhead. After the meal comes target practice. You shoulder your rifle on the damp range, eyes squinting down the iron sights at a wooden target shaped crudely like a man. The corporal paces behind you, correcting your stance, your grip, your breathing. When you fire, the recoil rattles your bones and leaves your shoulder tender. The smell of powder drifts on the cold air, mixing with the musty scent of wet earth. Each shot echoes with a question you are not yet ready to ask. Will your bullet find its mark when the target breathes, when it moves, when it fires back? You do not speak this thought. No one does. Instead, you clean your rifle again as dusk settles over the range, the targets pulled down and stacked like firewood. As darkness falls, you gather with your squad around a flickering lantern in the barracks. Otto pulls his sweetheart's photograph from his breast pocket, shows it to the circle of boys who nod and murmur polite admiration. One lad hums a folk song under his breath, and for a moment the barracks feels like any farmhouse kitchen, you warm and safe from the rain that taps gently on the roof. But beyond the barracks walls, the world is changing fast. Rumors drift in on the lips of messengers and sergeants, talk of battles already raging in distant fields, of columns marching through Belgium, of the enemy dug in deep along a river whose name you do not yet know but will soon learn by heart. Some speak of easy victory, a quick push that will sweep the French aside and open the road to Paris. Others, older and quieter, shake their heads and say nothing at all. When the lantern is finally dimmed, you lie again on your narrow bunk, boots tucked beneath to keep them dry from the damp that creeps through the floorboards. The straw mattress scratches your back. Outside, the camp is alive with distant footsteps, the occasional bark of a dog, the low murmur of guards patrolling the perimeter. You drift into uneasy dreams. In them, you see the parade ground flooded with men in gray, marching in endless lines that disappear into the mist. Somewhere ahead, you hear thunder, not the rumble of clouds, but the roar of distant guns. You feel the rifle's weight in your hands even as you sleep, and the knowledge that soon you will learn what it means to fire at more than wood and straw. For now, though, you sleep among strangers who will soon be brothers, beneath a thin blanket that does little to keep the chill at bay. The training has only begun. Your boots are caked in mud, your shoulders ache, your heart pounds with questions you dare not voice. Tomorrow, they say, will bring new lessons. Trenches dug in practice fields, gas drills that sting the eyes, drills that teach you how to march and fire and fix your bayonet when the enemy is near enough to see your eyes. Sleep if you can, Johann Adler. In the hush of the barracks, your breath joins the restless chorus of boys becoming soldiers, each one wondering, silently, if he will march home again when all this ends. The clock ticks on, counting down the hours until dawn calls you back to the parade ground once more. The third dawn at camp greets you with a sky washed in pale gray, the drizzle now turned to a fine mist that clings to your uniform like a second skin. The whistle's shriek comes before the first bird dares to sing, and again you rise from your straw mattress, joints stiff from the cold, boots still damp despite being tucked beneath your blanket through the night. Outside, the parade ground glistens with puddles that mirror the dull light of lanterns swinging on tall poles. You join your squad in formation, eyes forward, shoulders square. The sergeant paces before you, his boots leaving deep tracks in the sodden earth. Today, he says, you will learn to fight with the bayonet, the steel blade that turns your rifle from a distant threat into something far more personal. The squad is led to the edge of the camp, where wooden dummies stand impaled in the mud like scarecrows stripped of their straw hats. Each is marked with circles, the throat, the chest, the belly. The corporal explains, his voice low but clear over the murmuring mist. The bayonet is for when the enemy is too close to shoot. It is for when the line breaks, when the trenches flood, when the only choice is to stand your ground or be driven into it. He demonstrates first, stepping forward with a swift lunge that drives the steel deep into the wooden man's chest. The sound is dull, splinter on metal. He twists the rifle, withdraws the blade, steps back in one fluid motion. Around you, boys shift uneasily, hands tightening on their rifles. Otto beside you wipes the drizzle from his brow, though his eyes stay fixed on the splintered target. Then, it is your turn. You step to your place in front of the dummy, feet planted wide as the corporal showed. The rifle feels awkward in your grasp, its weight dragging your shoulders low. You draw a breath that tastes of damp earth and smoke from a nearby chimney. "Forward," the corporal barks. You thrust the bayonet. It strikes the wood off-center, lodging in the shoulder where no vital circle is marked. The corporal's hand is on your back in an instant, guiding your stance, correcting your grip. Again you lunge, this time finding the circle painted over the dummy's chest. The wood cracks, a splinter snapping free and falling into the mud. The corporal grunts his approval, then moves on to the next boy. For an hour, the squad repeats this grim dance. Forward, thrust, withdraw. Again, mud cakes your boots, splatters your trousers, sweat trickles down your spine despite the chill. With each strike, you try not to think of the dummy as anything more than wood and paint, yet you cannot help but imagine eyes staring back, wide with fear, reflecting your own. When the corporal calls for rest, you slump beside Otto on a nearby bench. He shakes his head, wiping his bayonet clean with a scrap of cloth. "My father taught me to mend a plow," he mutters, voice low so the sergeant will not hear. "Not this." You nod, but words fail you. Around you, the other boys sit in silence, some staring at the mud, others at their hands, each wrapped in thoughts they do not share. The rest is brief. Soon you are driven back to the parade ground for drills and formation. How to advance in line, how to hold the bayonet low when charging, how to brace for the recoil of bodies colliding in the chaos of battle. You run the motions until your shoulders burn and your arms grow heavy as lead. At noon, the field kitchen serves thin stew again, ladled into dented tin bowls. You eat without tasting, spoon scraping the bottom for a shred of potato or a scrap of fat. Beside you, a boy named Emil hums a tune from his village, a lullaby his mother sang when he was small. The tune drifts over the clatter of spoons and the rustle of oilcloth capes pulled tight against the drizzle. Afternoon brings another lesson, this one beneath a canvas awning stretched between two barracks. Here the corporal lectures on gas masks, the new terror whispered about in the barracks at night. He shows you the rubber hood, the filter canister, the way the straps must be pulled tight to seal out the poison that drifts low and clings to the earth like fog. You practice fitting the mask over and over, blindfolded, until your fingers find the straps by memory alone. By dusk, your legs tremble with fatigue. Your shoulders ache from drills and the weight of the rifle that never leaves your side. When the sergeant dismisses you, you trudge back to the barracks through the deepening mud, boots squelching with each weary step. Inside, the lantern flickers and spits shadows onto the low wooden walls. Otto lies on his bunk, his sweetheart's photograph tucked beneath his folded tunic. Emil hums again, softer now, until his voice fades into a snore. You sit on your bunk, polishing your bayonet by lantern light, watching your own reflection warp along the steel's narrow length. You wonder what it will feel like when the enemy is no longer painted wood but warm flesh and bone. You wonder if your hands will steady when the time comes, if your legs will carry you forward, if your heart will remain your own once the blade finds its mark. Outside, rain drums softly on the roof. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the camp, other young men, French, British, Russian, lie in similar bunks, staring at rafters, clutching photographs, learning the same lessons with different flags stitched to their sleeves. You lay the bayonet aside and pull the thin blanket over your chest. The straw beneath you shifts with your weight, a poor cushion against the chill that seeps from the floorboards. Sleep gathers at the edge of your mind like mist over a plowed field. For tonight you are still Johann Adler, a co-op's son from Bavaria. In your dreams, you stand again before the wooden dummy, bayonet poised, the circle painted bright on its chest. The corporal's voice calls the command, and you step forward, the world narrowing to the length of cold steel in your trembling hands. A week passes in the relentless rhythm of drills and orders, each dawn ushered in by the sharp cry of the sergeant's whistle, each dusk closing on tired bodies curled beneath scratchy blankets. The drizzle seldom lifts, leaving the parade ground a churned morass of wet earth that clings to boots and trousers alike. The smell of damp wool, boiled cabbage, and gun oil fills every corner of the camp. Today, the lesson is not one of rifles or bayonets, but of endurance. A march beyond the boundaries of the training ground, through the surrounding fields and villages that crouch beneath the iron-gray sky. You stand in line with your squad, rifle slung across your shoulder, pack heavy on your back. Otto stands beside you, adjusting the strap that cuts into his collarbone. The sergeant strides past, his mustache bristling like frostbitten brambles, his voice a growl that leaves no room for complaint. The column moves out just as dawn breaks fully, a ragged line of boys learning how to move as one. The mud sucks at your boots with each step, a steady pull that grows heavier with every mile. The rifle's wooden stock rubs raw against your shoulder, the leather strap stiff with dampness. Each breath turns to mist that lingers before your face and then vanishes into the chill air. You pass through the edge of a village. Shuttered windows, old women wrapped in shawls standing silently by garden gates. A dog barks once, then falls quiet. Children peer from behind fences, wide-eyed at the sight of so many soldiers trudging past in gray coats and muddied boots. Some wave, some do not. Beyond the village, the road dissolves into rutted tracks that snake between harvested fields. You see the black stalks of cabbages left to rot, the bones of summer's bounty already returned to the soil. The column halts only when the sergeant gives the order, and even then only long enough to draw a breath, adjust packs, drink from canteens that taste of old tin. At midday, the squad gathers beneath a stand of leafless trees, their bare branches scratching at the low sky. You chew on a crust of bread pulled from your pack, the crust so hard it threatens to break a tooth. Otto shares a strip of dried sausage, passing pieces along the line. No one speaks much. The march has stolen your words, leaving only the crunch of boots in wet earth and the quiet rasp of breath. When the sergeant calls you to rise again, your legs protest with every step. The pack seems to double in weight, the rifle a stubborn burden on your aching shoulder. Yet you keep moving, one foot ahead of the other, eyes fixed on the back of the boy in front of you. In this line, there is no room for daydreams of home, no place for thoughts of gardens or barrels waiting to be bound. There is only the road, the drizzle, the endless rhythm of boots on mud. Late in the afternoon, you come upon a clearing where the officers have set up a mock encampment. Tents flap in the damp wind, their canvas stained by rain and old smoke. Here you are taught how to pitch shelter quickly, how to dig shallow trenches for drainage, how to huddle together for warmth when night falls too cold to bear alone. The corporal explains the art of building a fire that will not betray your position, how to bank the embers, how to keep the smoke low. You squat with Otto beside a small flame that flickers in the breeze, warming your palms while your back shivers beneath a damp coat. He tells you of his father's farm, of pigs rooting beneath the orchard, of a sister who waits by the road each day for the postman, hoping for a letter that is yet to come. You listen, nodding when the silence stretches, though your mind drifts to your own village, your father's barrel hoop stacked by the door, your mother's garden dark and waiting for spring. When dusk descends, the squad forms up again for the march home. The path back seems longer than before, each mile a quiet contest between your blistered feet and the promise of the barracks' crude shelter. Stars blink through the rolling clouds, shy and fleeting, glimpsed only between the bare trees that line the muddy track. By the time the camp lanterns come into view, your legs feel carved from stone, every muscle a raw knot beneath the weight of the pack. The sergeant's voice has grown softer, his barks replaced by gruff reminders to clean rifles, to scrape mud from boots, to dry socks by the foot of the bunk stove. Inside the barracks, you peel off your coat and boots, fingers clumsy with exhaustion. Blisters bloom on your heels, raw and red, each step a reminder that your body is not yet hardened like the veterans. The men you sometimes glimpse at the edge of the parade ground, their eyes dark and distant, their uniforms worn to threadbare gray. Otto falls asleep with his back against the bunk wall, his mouth half open in a soft snore. Across the narrow aisle, Emil writes a letter home by lantern light, his pencil scratching across the cheap paper like an insect's legs. You watch him for a moment, then lay your head down on the straw. The scent of smoke and sweat drifts through the close air, the chorus of low snores blending with the drip of rain on the roof. Sleep comes slower tonight, your legs still twitching with the memory of the march, your shoulders echoing with the phantom weight of your rifle. You close your eyes and see the muddy road stretching on into the night, a path that grows darker with each mile yet to come. Tomorrow will bring new drills, new lessons in how to move, how to dig, how to stand shoulder to shoulder when the ground gives way beneath you. For now, you rest as Johann Adler, one among hundreds learning step by step how to carry the weight of a nation's hopes on weary feet and muddied boots beneath a foreign sky. Morning greets you not with the shriek of a whistle, but with the low murmur of voices drifting through the barracks like wood smoke. You wake to find Otto already perched on the edge of his bunk, boots half-laced, eyes fixed on the doorway where a corporal stands holding a small canvas sack, its seams bulging with folded paper. The corporal's voice rasps over the creak of the floorboards as he calls out names one by one. Each name is met with a hand thrust eagerly into the sack, fingers trembling as they fish out a letter sealed in thick paper, the script a reminder that somewhere beyond this cold camp, someone still thinks of you as more than a uniform and a rifle. When your name is called, Johann Adler, you feel a warmth that no blanket in this damp barracks could ever bring. The envelope is smudged with travel, the ink blurred at one corner where your mother's hand must have rested as she wrote. You break the seal with care, folding the paper open like a small treasure. Her words spill across the page, steady and plain, each line a slender thread pulling you back to the timbered house you left behind. She writes of your father's barrels lined up in the shed, of the goats that have taken to breaking through the garden gate, of the village priest who asks after you each Sunday. She does not mention her worry, but you see it between her words, feel it in the neatness of each letter. She tells you to eat well, to mind your boots, to keep your head down when the officers are near. She closes with a promise. Your place at the table is waiting, whenever you come home. Otto reads his own letter beside you, his thumb brushing the edge of the photograph he carries like a charm. He does not speak, but smiles, small and private, before folding the letter neatly and tucking it away. Around you, boys laugh and sigh and share small scraps of news. A sister's wedding, a father's new horse, a baby born while the father marches in boots, just like yours. The corporal leaves as silently as he arrived, the sack now limp at his side. In his wake drifts a hush that settles heavy over the rows of bunks, as if the paper in your hands has pulled you all back for a fleeting moment to places far softer than this rough wooden barracks. But the spell breaks when the sergeant's boots stamp at the door. His voice cuts through the warmth like cold wind through a cracked window. Drills await, rifles must be cleaned, the parade ground waits, with its endless mud and shouted commands. The letters are folded into breast pockets, tucked close to hearts that beat faster now, reminded of all that lies beyond these fences. Outside, the drizzle has thickened to a steady rain. The squad assembles beneath its weight, collars turned high, rifles slung tight against packs that never seem to grow lighter. Today's drill is not of marching, but of trenches, the long scars in the earth that have become the new shape of war. You follow your squad to the far edge of the camp, where the practice trench lies, a zigzag ditch cut deep into the sodden field, its walls lined with planks to keep the mud at bay. You drop into its cold embrace, boots sinking ankle-deep as you crouch beside Otto and listen to the corporal's lesson. He speaks of saps and fire steps, of duckboards that keep your feet from drowning in the mire, of parapets and periscopes, and how to fix your bayonet when the order comes to go over the top. He shows you where to stand when the shells fall, how to brace your rifle across the sandbag wall, how to keep your head low when bullets snap overhead like hornets in summer. The rain turns the trench floor into a slick brown soup. You slip once, nearly losing your footing as your boots slide beneath you. Otto catches your arm, steadying you with a grin that says, for now, at least, this is just a lesson. The real trenches lie somewhere out there, beyond the low hills that vanish in the mist. At midday, the squad huddles beneath a canvas stretched over the trench mouth. Stew is ladled into dented mess tins, steam curling into the damp air. You eat with your back pressed to the plank wall, rain dripping from your helmet brim into your tin. Emil mutters about rumors he heard from a passing supply driver, that the front is moving faster than the officers say, that the French are dug in deep along the Marne, that soon the new boys will be needed to fill the gaps left by regiments battered in Belgium. Rumors cling to the trench walls like the mud to your boots. Some say the war will end by Christmas, that you will be home to toast the new year beneath your father's rafters. Others whisper that the enemy is stronger than anyone dared guess, that the push to Paris has stalled in fields drowned by autumn rains and blood. The corporal snaps the squad back to work. You practice moving through the trench in single file, rifles held high to keep the barrels dry. You crouch low at the firing step, peering over the edge at a field of sodden straw targets meant to mimic the enemy line. Your fingers grow numb around the stock, your breath misting the iron sight. By the time the whistle calls you back to camp, your boots are heavy with clay, your trousers soaked through. You strip them off in the barracks, draping them over the stovepipe in hopes they might dry by morning. Otto sits cross-legged on his bunk, pen in hand, scratching out a reply to his sweetheart in a careful scrawl that betrays how much he wants to say. You unfold your mother's letter again, smoothing the creases, reading her words one more time beneath the flicker of the lantern. They speak of home, of warmth, of things untouched by this place of mud and iron and barked commands. You tuck the letter into your breast pocket, pressing it flat against your chest, a small shield for the nights to come. Outside, the rain drums on. Somewhere in the dark, a train whistle calls, carrying with it fresh rumors, fresh orders, fresh young men who have not yet tasted the weight of the trench floor beneath their boots. You drift into sleep with the letter near your heart. The ghost of your mother's voice, whispering of gardens and barrels, and warm bread waiting on a table that, for now, lives only in your dreams. Dawn breaks in streaks of pale light that slip through the slats of the barracks walls. For once, the rain has paused, leaving the air damp but still. The sergeant's whistle sounds later than usual, a small mercy that grants you a few more moments wrapped in the warmth of your thin blanket and the quiet hush of sleeping breaths. But the day waits for no one. Soon you stand again in formation, boots lined in rows, rifles gleaming where the oil has been rubbed in by weary hands. The sergeant barks your squad to attention and announces that today, you will not march, nor dig, nor stab at dummies in the mud. Today, you will listen. The squad files toward a small clearing at the far edge of the camp, where an old tent stands beneath a bare-limbed oak. There, a figure waits, older than any corporal or sergeant you have yet seen, his uniform faded, his eyes sunk deep beneath a cap, pulled low over thinning hair. He sits on a crate, pipe stem caught between teeth yellowed with tobacco, fingers wrapped around a battered canteen. This is Feldwebel Reinhardt, they tell you, a veteran of wars your fathers only spoke of in passing, stories told by the hearth when the wind howled outside and the barrels needed binding. Reinhardt fought in Africa, they say, in dusty places so hot the air shimmered above rifle barrels, places where sun and thirst were enemies as fierce as any soldier. You gather round him, Otto settling cross-legged beside you in the crisp grass still wet from the night's mist. Reinhardt eyes you each in turn, pipe smoke curling from his mouth in lazy spirals. When he speaks, his voice is a gravelly rumble, the kind that settles into your bones like an old ache. He tells you first of dust and thirst, of a column of men stretched thin along desert tracks, of nights spent with sand scratching at eyelids, of comrades buried beneath lonely acacia trees. He tells it not to boast, but to remind you that war is a patient beast, waiting beyond the horizon for the moment when your boots slip, when your water runs dry, when your courage cracks in the sun. Then he shifts to what matters now, the trenches. He describes their smell, a rank stew of sweat, smoke, wet earth, and fear. He speaks of nights when the sky itself seems alive with fire, when the earth heaves and shudders beneath barrages that fall like iron hail. He tells of the rats, bold as stray dogs, fattened on scraps no man dares to think too long about. He tells of the cold, the way it seeps into marrow, stealing warmth from your hands so that working a rifle bolt becomes an agony of numb fingers and clumsy gloves. You listen. You all do. Even the sergeant stands quiet, arms folded across his chest, boots planted wide. Reinhardt pauses at times, relighting his pipe, tapping the ash onto the damp ground. He looks at you as though he sees not your young faces, but the shapes you might yet become. Men folded into the narrow space between life and the line. Men who might one day tell the same tales with the same far-off eyes. When Otto asks if it is true that the trenches flood so deep you can drown standing up, Reinhardt nods once. He describes men shoveling muck in the dark, boots sucked from their feet by the mire, bodies half buried in water that freezes their toes to stone. He does not spare you the truth. He does not sweeten it with talk of glory or medals. His tales are thick with mud and fear, and the sharp, quiet terror that comes when the whistle blows, and a man must climb the ladder into no man's land. Yet, for all the bleakness, there is something else in his words. A thread of iron that holds the telling together. He speaks of brothers found in strangers, of songs hummed beneath gas masks when the wind shifts wrong. He tells of coffee brewed over trench fires, traded for a tin of meat or a pinch of tobacco. He speaks of letters, scraps of home that keep the heart beating when everything else turns to rot and ruin. When the pipe burns to its end, Reinhardt leans forward, elbows on knees. He meets each of your eyes in turn. His words fall soft now, nearly drowned by the wind, sighing through the bare branches overhead. He says you will march soon, that the trains will come for you, rattling east or west depending on the High Command's will, that you will carry the weight of the nation on shoulders, still raw from new boots and stiff collars. But he tells you this too. If you remember the man beside you, if you keep his name close, his voice near, you will find a way to stand when the shells come. You may curse the mud, the lice, the cold, the hunger, but you will stand so long as the line beside you holds. He lifts himself from the crate with a grunt, pipe tucked into a pocket of his faded tunic. The corporal calls you back into formation. Reinhardt watches you rise, watches your boots tramp back toward the barracks, his eyes narrowed in the thin morning light, as if he sees a battlefield yet to come painted across your shoulders. That night, back beneath the rough rafters and flickering lantern, you find sleep slow to come. Otto lies awake too, staring at the knot of wood above his bunk. You wonder if he is hearing the same words you do, the veteran's voice telling of trenches and storms of steel, of fear and fellowship, and the small, stubborn flame that keeps a man upright when the world crumbles around him. Your boots rest at the foot of your bunk, caked still with yesterday's mud. Your rifle leans against the wall, cleaned and oiled, but heavy all the same. Outside, a breeze lifts the flap of the barracks door, carrying with it the smell of distant fires, the first trace of frost, and a whisper of the countless footsteps that have marched this road before you. Sleep, when it comes, is uneasy but deep, carrying you toward the trenches Reinhardt described. Though tonight they are empty, silent but for the wind sighing through the broken earth. When morning comes, it does so on the back of a clear sky, a pale sweep of blue that feels almost out of place above the mud and wood of the camp. Frost has settled overnight, turning the churned parade ground into a crust of white that crunches under your boots as you fall into line once more. There is a hush among the squads today, a tremor that runs from man to man like a secret too heavy to speak aloud. The sergeant's eyes are sharp, his mustache bristling in the cold as he paces before you. Behind him, near the supply shed, stands an officer you have not seen before. A lieutenant in a crisp greatcoat that sets him apart from the weary corporals and the grizzled Feldwebel Reinhardt. You stand shoulder to shoulder with Otto and Emil, the frost steaming faintly from your collars, where your breath rises to meet the morning. The lieutenant clears his throat. His voice is soft but carries easily across the rows of gray uniforms. Orders have come. The first companies are to move out within days, bound for the front by rail. You listen, the words falling like stones into your chest, each one a cold weight pressing deeper. You know it must come. You have drilled, dug, marched, and learned to fight in the mud and rain for this moment, yet hearing it spoken aloud cracks the world into a before and an after. Your company is named among the first. There is no cheer. No one claps hands to shoulders in celebration. Instead, you stand in the frost, boots rooted in churned earth, listening as the lieutenant explains that supply wagons will follow, that mail will find you when it can, that you are the Kaiser's own, and that your duty calls you forward. The rest of the day is a blur of preparations. Your rifle is checked and checked again. Your pack is stripped, its contents laid out on your bunk. Spare socks, dry biscuits, tin cup, letters folded in the breast pocket of your tunic. The sergeant inspects each piece as though your life depends on every brass button and strip of canvas being in its proper place. And you know now that it does. In the supply shed, you queue for extra rations. Dried meat, black bread wrapped in waxed paper, tins of tinned fish that taste more of salt than anything from the sea. Otto mutters that his mother would weep to see him trade warm soup for this. You nod but say nothing, your eyes drifting to the rail line that cuts through the edge of camp. Beyond it, the hills rise low and rolling beneath the bright winter sky, a sky that seems to mock the cold earth waiting for you far ahead. That evening, the barracks are alive with the low murmur of voices, the scratching of pens across thin paper. Emil writes another letter, tongue pressed to his lip, as he tries to find the words to tell his mother what comes next. Otto polishes his boots for the third time in an hour, each stroke of the cloth slower than the last, as if the shine might hold him back a day longer. You sit on your bunk, your own letter half finished on your knee. You try to write of bravery and pride, of standing firm with your comrades, yet each word feels hollow, too thin to carry the truth. You settle instead for small things, the cold that creeps through the floorboards at night, the steam of the stew at midday, the kindness of Otto, who shares his sausage when yours runs dry. When the lamps dim, sleep comes fitfully. You wake more than once to the sound of boots passing in the dark, sentries, corporals, restless boys pacing the floor between bunks. Somewhere near dawn, you dream of your father's workshop, of barrels stacked high against the timber wall. You hear your mother's voice calling you in for supper, smell fresh bread on the table. Then the dream fractures under the shrill cry of the whistle, and the barracks is no longer a boy's world, but the waiting room for men on the cusp of war. You rise, pull your boots on, lace them tight. Beside you, Otto folds his sweetheart's photograph into his breast pocket, his fingers lingering on the soft creases. Emil tucks his letter into an envelope, slips it beneath his tunic, where it will stay until he can pass it to the post clerk before the train. Outside, the frost crackles beneath your feet as you gather near the rail line, rifles slung, packs hoisted, bayonets strapped at your hips. The train stands waiting, a line of boxcars and canvas-topped wagons, its iron body steaming in the morning chill. A whistle blows, not the sergeant's this time, but the conductor's, sharp and final as a bell toll. You climb aboard with Otto close behind, your pack heavy on your shoulders, your heart heavier still. The car smells of straw and old wood, of oil and leather. Boys settle onto benches, rifles laid across their knees. Some speak softly, promises traded of letters home, of coming back whole and standing tall when this is done. When the engine shudders and the car jolts forward, you feel the last grip of the training camp slip from your boots. Fields roll past the narrow windows, brown furrows half lost beneath frost, trees bare and black against the pale sky. You press your hand to the pocket where your mother's letter rests, a fragile shield against the unknown miles ahead. The train clatters on, carrying you toward a front line you have never seen, to trenches Reinhard spoke of in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. You ride on steel wheels and steam, carried by a promise that no longer feels like victory or glory, but like something simpler and harder to name. The hope that when this road ends, you will still be standing, rifle in hand, breath in your chest, a boy from Bavaria holding fast beneath a foreign sky. The train rattles on through the low hills and quiet villages of the fatherland, carrying you and your comrades farther from the familiar lanes of home and deeper into the unknown. Morning drifts into afternoon, and the pale light that spilled through the cracks in the boxcar fades to a muted gloom. Inside the wagon, boys doze with heads resting on packs or rifles laid across laps. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails becomes a lullaby of sorts, masking the unease that clings to each man, like the cold seeping through the wooden walls. Now and then, the train slows as it passes small stations, platforms where old men and women stand to watch, scarves pulled tight, eyes fixed on the endless line of gray uniforms sliding past. You sit pressed between Otto and Emil, your knees pulled tight to your chest to make room for the packs piled in the aisle. Otto tries to talk of home, of the orchard behind his father's barn, of spring blooms that will come whether or not he is there to see them. But the words falter, dissolving into silence, broken only by the low hum of voices further down the car. Some boys share bread and dried sausage, tearing it with hands made clumsy by cold and fatigue. A few pass around a battered tin flask that smells of schnapps, its warmth burning down throats raw from train dust. When it comes to you, you take only a small sip, enough to light a brief fire in your belly before passing it on. Through a narrow slit in the planked wall, you watch the countryside pass, forests stripped bare for winter, narrow rivers winding through meadows turned to frost. Now and then, you glimpse other trains on parallel tracks, flat cars piled high with crates marked with stencils you cannot read, canvas wagons crowded with horses whose breath steams in the cold air. At dusk, the train halts in a siding beside a small village whose name you do not know. Officers move down the line, checking car to car, voices low but sharp. A corporal ducks into your wagon, orders the squad to stand and stretch legs before the final leg of the ride. You clamber down onto the cinder track, boots crunching on frozen gravel. The air outside is sharp enough to sting your lungs, fresher than the stale warmth of the boxcar. Around you, figures emerge into the dusk. Boys shaking sleep from stiff limbs, rubbing frost from their collars. A fire burns near the station house, its glow painting young faces in flickers of orange and shadow. Emil crouches beside the fire, hands spread to catch the heat. Otto stands nearby, head tilted back to watch the stars emerge one by one in the clear sky above. The village itself lies quiet beyond the line, shuttered windows, a single lamp glowing above a tavern door, a church spire just visible against the falling night. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then silence returns, thick and complete. Rations are handed out from canvas sacks, stale rolls, a wedge of hard cheese, a half-handful of nuts that crack beneath your teeth. It is not much, but hunger has a way of making even this taste like a feast. You eat beside the fire, the heat sinking slowly into hands that will soon go numb again when the train calls you back. A supply officer passes through the gathering, speaking low to each corporal and sergeant. Whispers spread like brush fire. The train will reach a staging point by dawn, a village not far from the front where fresh troops gather before moving up to the lines in small groups. Some say the French are pushing back harder than expected, that fresh reserves are needed to hold the line through winter's bite. Others repeat tales of trenches so deep a man could stand upright and vanish beneath the mud. Otto nudges you with an elbow, points to a wagon further down the siding where horses are being unloaded, tall shapes stamping in the frost, steam rising from flanks that shimmer under lantern light. Somewhere beyond the wagons, you hear the clatter of gun carriages being rolled from flat cars, wheels rattling like iron drums on the frozen ground. When the order comes, you climb back into the boxcar, your legs heavy, boots crusted in frost. Inside, the stale warmth greets you again, the smell of oil and sweat, straw trampled flat, where boys have slept and dreamed of fields far from here. Otto settles beside you with a grunt, arms folded across his chest for warmth. Emil lies back, cap pulled low over his eyes, fingers curled around a pencil stub as though he might wake to write one more line before sleep takes him fully. The whistle blows. The train shudders and pulls away from the siding, the village lanterns sliding backward into the dark. Ahead lies only the promise of trenches, lines scratched deep into a foreign land, waiting like open mouths to swallow you whole. You lean your head against the wooden wall, eyes fixed on the crack where the night slips through. Somewhere beyond the rattle of wheels and the hush of breath and dreams, the front waits beneath the same cold stars that watched you in your father's yard. When sleep comes, it is restless. You dream not of home, nor even of battle, but of the endless road between the two. Steel rails, cold wind, and a horizon that gives nothing away except the certainty that you are not the first to ride this path, and will not be the last. The train rolls to a stop under a sky the color of wet slate, dawn breaking as a pale smear above a line of black trees. You wake to the hiss of steam, the clank of couplings unfastened, the low murmur of voices stirring in the cold boxcar. Around you, boys blink sleep from their eyes, boots scrape on the straw-covered floor, and the chill rushes in through the gaps as the sliding door rattles open. You step down into the frost. Your boots crunch on the cinder and packed earth of a siding that looks no different from any other. Yet the air carries something new, an edge you feel beneath the skin of your neck. A village lies spread beyond the tracks, squat stone houses with roofs of heavy slate, smoke curling lazily from a handful of chimneys. Church bells toll somewhere distant, their echo drifting through the frozen dawn. Sergeants bark orders to form ranks, to shoulder packs, to check rifles slung at your side. Otto stumbles as he hefts his bag, his breath rising in ragged clouds. Emil pulls his coat tight, his eyes darting across the crowd of strangers, boys who, like you, have traveled miles by rail to stand here at the threshold of war. A line of wagons waits near the edge of the siding. Their canvas covers flap gently in the breeze, and horses paw at the hard ground, harnesses jingling with every restless toss of their heads. Teams of men in long gray coats move among the wagons, tossing down crates marked with black stencils. Ammunition, biscuits, tins of meat, coils of wire. The smell of gun oil and cold leather mixes with wood smoke drifting from the village chimneys. You and your squad are marched along the road that runs between the siding and the church square. Mud squelches beneath your boots, where frost has begun to melt under the press of wagon wheels and trampling feet. The village itself seems half asleep. Shuttered windows, doors barely cracked open to watch you pass. Now and then, you catch a glimpse of a child peering around a mother's skirts, wide eyes fixed on your uniform, your rifle, your muddied boots. Near the church, an old barn has been given over to fresh arrivals. You duck inside with your pack still on your back, the warmth of many bodies and the sharp tang of straw and sweat greeting you all at once. Boys press close along rough wooden benches, packs stacked high in corners, rifles propped against the stone walls where old farm tools once hung. Lanterns swing from beams blackened by decades of smoke. The sergeant calls your squad to sit. You settle next to Otto, who pulls off his cap and wipes his brow with a sleeve. Emil fumbles for his tin cup and canteen, eyes scanning the room that hums with the low thrum of half-heard stories. Whispers of the line drift from bench to bench, of trenches that run for miles, of wire and mud and men who vanish beneath the shellfire without a trace. When a corporal strides in, the hum quiets to a hush. He lays out the next orders in a voice that carries to the far beams. You are to rest here until dusk. At nightfall, you will march in small squads up to the forward reserve line. Not yet the trenches proper, but close enough that the guns can be heard, a low, distant thunder that does not care for the silence of villages or the prayers of farmhands. Food arrives in battered tins passed hand to hand, pale beans swimming in grease, thick black bread broken into hunks too small to fill the hollow in your belly. Yet no one complains. You eat with your legs drawn close to your chest, the warmth of bodies on either side warding off the cold that still seeps through the barn's stone walls. When the meal is done, you drift to the barn door and lean against the rough timber frame. Beyond the square, the road winds away between hedgerows and low stone walls dusted with frost. The sky has cleared to a pale blue now, sunlight striking the church spire so that it gleams like the tip of a bayonet thrust toward heaven. Beside you, Otto lights a stub of a cigarette, cupping the flame from the weak wind. He offers you a draw, and you take it, the smoke catching in your throat before drifting out in slow coils that vanish into the morning air. Neither of you speak for a long while. There is nothing to say that hasn't been spoken already. Not here, not now. With the distant guns like a heartbeat, you feel more than here. Behind you in the barn, boys roll letters between trembling fingers, eyes darting to the door as if they might still slip away before dusk comes. When the sun begins its slow arc down the winter sky, you roll your blanket tight, check your kit once more. The sergeant's voice drifts through the barn, a steady anchor against the mounting hush. Dusk will come fast. The march will be long. And beyond that march waits the trench, the narrow gash of earth Reinhardt described with eyes that seem to look through you and far beyond. You shoulder your pack once more, rifle slung tight, boots shifting in the straw as the squad forms up in the growing gloom. Outside, lanterns flicker along the road. Somewhere beyond the village, the guns whisper louder now, a promise or a warning, carried on the wind. You step out into the falling night, Johann Adler, a cooper's son from Bavaria with your mother's letter folded close to your heart. Each footstep carries you farther from the warmth of barns and hearths, toward a line in the earth, where the world will change you in ways you cannot yet see. Above, the first stars tremble into view, watching as you vanish into the dark that lies between the village and the front. Night swallows the road ahead in slow, patient gulps as your squad marches out of the staging village and into the hush of open fields. Lanterns left behind flicker like fading stars, swallowed by the soft roll of hedgerows and frost-bitten ditches that run alongside the rutted track. Your boots strike mud half frozen at the surface, breaking the thin crust so that each step sinks just enough to pull at your soles. Around you, the squad moves in silence, broken only by the scuff of boots, the low creak of packs, the clink of a canteen, or mess tin striking a buckle. Otto trudges beside you, his breath a pale mist in the dark. Emil walks just ahead, his shoulders hunched as if to ward off the cold that wraps around your neck like a wet rope. Somewhere ahead, the sergeant's shape looms in the half-light, his voice a low rasp whenever the line threatens to drift too far left or right along the winding road. Above, the moon drifts in and out of clouds, casting quicksilver glimpses of frost on fences and the black skeletons of winter trees. After an hour or more of slow marching, you crest a small rise and feel it, the distant, low growl that vibrates faintly through the soles of your boots. The front. The guns. Not yet close enough to drown your thoughts, but near enough that the earth itself hums with their promise. At a crossroads marked only by a toppled milestone, The squad halts to catch breath. A pair of wagons rattle by, horses steaming in the cold, drivers hunched low in thick coats. The wagons carry rolls of wire, crates of shells, planks for shoring up trench walls battered by rain and shellfire. You watch them pass, their iron-rimmed wheels chewing deep ruts into the frozen mud. When the order comes to move again, you slip back into line, the road narrowing now to a track little more than a cart path winding through stands of black pines. The trees crowd close, their bare limbs scratching at your shoulders as you pass, their roots like bones rising through the rutted earth. Somewhere in that dark, an owl calls once, its cry swallowed by the soft thunder of guns far ahead. Otto taps your elbow, jerks his chin toward a faint flicker between the trees. A campfire, perhaps, or a lantern marking the way. You say nothing, conserving your breath for the steady march. When you break from the trees at last, the ground slopes gently down into a hollow, where low shapes crouch beneath earthen berms. Shadows move there. Men in greatcoats huddled around barrels, burning scraps of wood and old straw. The sergeant signals you to halt again. He confers with another NCO whose cap sits crooked on hair matted with sweat despite the cold. Their words are lost to the wind, but soon the signal comes. Down into the reserve line. You shuffle forward, boots crunching frost and grit until you reach the lip of your first trench. It is nothing like the neat practice ditches dug in camp. This is a raw gash in the earth, its walls half collapsed in places, the duckboards slick with frozen mud. The reek hits you first. Old sweat, damp wool, the sour bite of latrines dug too shallow and too close. A corporal waits just inside the trench mouth, his eyes shadowed beneath a helmet scuffed bare of paint at the brim. He gestures you down the rough steps, one by one, until your boots hit the duckboard and the walls close in on either side. High enough to block the moon, low enough that the wind still cuts through the gaps. Inside, you move single file through the narrow passage. Now and then, you pass a hunched figure on sentry duty, helmet pulled low, rifle laid across knees or cradled in cold hands. Faces flicker in the glow of guttering lanterns wedged into niches in the trench wall. Boys no older than you, yet the way they watch you pass is different. Their eyes hold a quiet weight that training never taught you, a knowledge you have yet to earn. At a shallow dugout near a sandbagged corner, the sergeant stops the squad. This stretch of trench is yours for now. A reserve position, a few hundred yards behind the front line itself, but close enough that you can feel the guns when they speak through the frozen ground. Otto lowers his pack onto a plank shelf, his breath coming fast and shallow in the stale air. Emil rubs his hands together, glancing at the low timber roof that leaks a thin thread of frost with every gust of wind. A lantern swings gently from a nail driven into the wall, its light catching the frost rime on your collar and the mud caked on your boots. The sergeant gives instructions in that quiet voice men use when the enemy might be listening. You are to keep low when moving along the trench. You are to clean your rifle tonight, check your bayonet, sleep when you can, eat when you are told. He does not bother to promise safety. Not here, not now when the next whistle could bring orders to move forward. Rations arrive in battered tins. Gray meat and black bread, cold tea poured into tin cups that steam faintly before losing their warmth to the night. You eat perched on an ammo crate, knees drawn close, eyes drifting to the sliver of sky overhead where the stars glitter like frost trapped in black cloth. Somewhere beyond the parapet, the guns thud again. Closer now, each report a dull punch to the ribs that rattles your boots on the duckboard floor. Otto hunches lower with each distant boom, his shoulders tight beneath his coat. Emil pulls out his pencil and scrap of paper, but the words do not come tonight. The page remains blank beneath the flickering lantern light. When at last you curl up on your blanket in the dugout's damp straw, your rifle rests close at hand, bayonet sheathed and waiting like a cold promise beside your knee. You close your eyes, but sleep does not come easily. Beneath the thunder of guns and the hiss of your own breath, you hear it. The trench speaking in its slow, endless voice. Here you learn. Here you endure. Here you wait. And so you lie awake, Johann Adler, a Coopera's son far from the sweet rows of barrels in your father's shed. The front has found you at last, and now the cold earth beneath your shoulder is yours to hold, for as long as your courage and your breath remain. Sleep drifts around you like mist, but never truly settles. Now and then you doze, cheek pressed to your arm, only to wake at some faint rustle. Boots on duckboards, a cough muffled by a scarf, the distant clatter of a spade against frozen earth. Somewhere outside the dugout, the guns speak in slow pulses that roll through the trench wall and into your bones. When the sergeant's hand shakes your shoulder, you blink awake to find the dugout lit by a single lantern, its flame small and shivering in the damp. Otto sits beside you, eyes wide, helmet already strapped beneath his chin. Emil stands near the entrance, rifle across his chest, bayonet fixed, though no order has yet been given for it. The sergeant's voice is low but sharp. Stand to. The night is restless. The front line ahead has seen flares and shadows that should not be there. Patrols, perhaps, or a probing party testing for weakness in the wire. You shoulder your pack and rifle, boots heavy with sleep and mud as you follow the squad single file along the narrow trench. Outside, the sky is a black cloth torn here and there by the flicker of distant artillery. From somewhere far left, a star shell arcs up in ghostly green, its light painting the frozen ground in an unearthly glow before drifting back to darkness. The wind carries the smell of burnt powder and wet earth. At the fire step, you crouch low beside Otto. The parapet rises before you. A wall of sandbags crusted with frost, wire snarled just beyond, its barbs hung with scraps of cloth and the sad tatter of a torn greatcoat that flaps whenever the wind shifts. Emil takes the next post over, his breath hissing between clenched teeth each time he scans the narrow slice of no man's land before you. Somewhere beyond the wire, a shadow might be moving. Or maybe it's only the wind nudging dead grass along the frozen ground. You do not know yet how to trust your eyes in this half-light. A flare snaps up not far ahead, bursting with a fizz and a wash of harsh white. In its brief glare, you see the world laid bare, the ragged ditch of your trench, the shredded wire glinting like wet teeth, the churned earth cratered by shells. For a heartbeat, you swear you see shapes crawling low. But when the darkness falls again, all is still but for the distant rattle of machine gun fire far down the line. The corporal moves behind you, checking each man in turn. His boots crunch on the duckboards. He smells of cold sweat and pipe smoke, his hand steady on your shoulder as he leans in to whisper, "Hold fast. Wait for the whistle. Do not fire unless ordered." You nod, though your hands are slick on the rifle stock despite the cold. Time stretches thin in the trench. You shift your weight, peering through the firing slit at the black field beyond. Otto's shoulder presses against yours now and then, an anchor in the restless dark. Between your feet, water drips from a broken plank, pattering softly into a pool that smells of iron and earth. When the first shells come, you feel them before you hear them. A low rumble that grows, then splits the air with a roar that shudders through your ribs. The ground bucks as the barrage lands somewhere farther up the line, but close enough that mud rains down in wet clumps from the trench wall. Otto ducks his head, muttering a prayer that is swallowed by the next crash. Another shell, closer this time. Then another. The air tastes of cordite and churned soil. Shouts echo down the trench, men passing orders in voices pitch low but urgent. Hold your post. Keep your head down. Watch the wire. You dare a glance over the parapet when the next flare bursts overhead. The shell holes seem closer now, the wire trembling in the wind and concussion. Somewhere ahead, rifle fire cracks in short, nervous bursts, the front line testing shadows or shadows testing them. A runner stumbles past, boots slipping in the slick duckboards, face pale beneath a rim of sweat frozen to his collar. He carries no rifle, only a dispatch case strapped tight to his chest. His breath ghosts behind him as he vanishes into the trench bend. The sergeant crouches beside you, his words nearly lost under the next rumble. They may push tonight. Small party. Just a probe. You stand your ground, Adler, understand? You nod again, mouth too dry for words. Your hands tighten on the rifle until your knuckles burn. When the flare light fades, the darkness feels deeper than before. You hear the wire rattle once, twice. Or maybe it is only your heartbeat filling your ears. You risk a glance at Otto, see his lips move in a silent counting that steadies the tremble in his shoulders. Emil shifts, lifts his rifle to his shoulder, barrel resting on the sandbag wall, then quiet. The guns fall back to a distant growl. No footsteps in the wire. No whistle to fire. Only the cold and the drip of water and the stink of mud and fear shared between boys learning, moment by moment, what it means to hold a line in the dark. When dawn at last stains the sky a pale gray, you are still there, boots sunk in the duckboards, rifle held across your chest like a promise. No attack came, not this night, but something inside you feels different all the same. You have heard the guns whisper your name. You have crouched behind sandbags waiting for an enemy you could not see. And as the sun climbs low through the drifting mist, you know the trench has claimed a piece of you. A small part that will not wash away when the mud dries, nor fade when the guns grow silent once more. Morning in the trench is a pale thing, not quite bright enough to chase away the shadows clinging to the corners where the dugout walls sweat damp through the timber planks. The sky above is a hard, washed-out gray that gives no warmth, only a flat light that shows you every rough board, every frayed edge of canvas, every muddy boot print pressed into the duckboards. After the long night at the fire step, you stand with Otto and Emil, shoulders hunched, rifles slung but close enough to reach in a heartbeat. The sergeant gives orders in the same low voice he used in the dark hours, as if the daylight changes nothing here, as if the trench keeps its own time that does not answer to the sun. Breakfast is a crust of bread gone stale in your pack, a cup of tea poured lukewarm into a tin mug blackened by 100 fires. You drink it crouched on your haunches near a bend in the trench where a battered plank bridge crosses a shallow sump. The tea is sour but welcome, the warmth of it settling somewhere deep in your chest before the chill creeps back in. Word drifts down the line like smoke. There was fighting before dawn at the forward wire. A small patrol, French or British, no one knows, crept close to test the gap. They left a man behind, tangled in the wire when the flares went up. Now, just beyond the parapet, a shape lies half hidden in the frost and churned earth, coat dark with mud, and something darker that the cold has frozen into stiff patches along the sleeves and collar. You do not see him at first. But when the sergeant orders a working party to mend a section of fallen sandbags, you find yourself sent forward with a shovel and Otto at your shoulder. The frost crunches underfoot where it clings to the trench walls. And when you peer through the firing step's narrow slit, you see him, a figure slumped like a broken puppet among the snarled wire. The wind catches his coat and lifts it slightly, a ragged flag that flutters, then falls still. No one says much as you work. You drive the shovel into the soft, cold earth, filling sandbags with mud that clings to your fingers even through your gloves. Otto works beside you in silence, his breath white clouds that drift up to catch the pale light overhead. Now and then, he wipes at his nose with the back of his sleeve, but he does not look toward the wire again. Somewhere down the line, rifle fire cracks once, a sharp report that rattles down the trench and makes you flinch before you remember to breathe. The sergeant's voice comes from behind, steadying. Keep working. Keep your head down. Eyes on your hands. You do as told, pressing the mud into place, binding the new sandbags tight, your shoulders aching with the cold weight of the wet earth. When the repairs are done, you are ordered to rest near a shallow dugout. You slump onto an empty ammo crate with Otto beside you. The two of you pressed knee to knee for warmth that neither of you feel. Emil joins you moments later, his face pale and drawn, eyes darting back toward the parapet as if the shape in the wire might sit up and crawl forward at any moment. He asks no questions and you offer no answers. You sit in silence, sharing the hush that hangs over the trench like a low mist. Now and then, a runner hurries past with a dispatch tucked inside his coat, boots slick with the same mud that cakes your hands and sleeves. Somewhere far off, the guns cough once, then again, the sound rolling through the earth to settle in your bones like the slow beat of a drum. An older soldier, one of the reservists from another squad, appears from a dugout with a coil of wire looped around his shoulder and a heavy canvas sheet in his arms. He does not speak, only nods to the sergeant before slipping through the firing step gap into the flat ground beyond the trench. He moves low, boots sinking into the churned frost as he picks his way carefully through the snarled wire. When he reaches the fallen figure, he crouches for a moment that feels longer than it should. Then he spreads the canvas over what remains, tucking it tight as if the dead man might feel the wind. You watch only once before turning your eyes to your boots. Otto mutters a prayer beneath his breath. You do not catch the words, only the soft tremor of his voice that carries in the cold air. Emil digs his fingers into the loose seam of his coat sleeve, picking at threads that unravel like thoughts he cannot speak aloud. The reservist returns in silence, the empty stretch of wire behind him covered now by the dull canvas that flaps softly each time the wind finds its edge. No one asks who the man was. No one says if he will be carried back behind the line, or if he will lie there until the ground softens enough for a grave. Such questions are left to the officers, to the scribbled ledgers that keep the war's tally hidden from boys with rifles and too little sleep. When dusk edges down the sky once more, the sergeant sends you back to the fire step. You stand watch with Otto at your side, the parapet cold beneath your gloves, the rifle a dull weight that no longer feels strange in your hands. Beyond the wire, the shape under the canvas has vanished into the deepening dark. Yet you know he is there, a reminder stitched into the earth that tomorrow's frost might hold another and another, until the ground itself can bear no more. You hold your post until the flare goes up, your breath a slow ghost in the night. The trench hums with the small sounds of men awake and waiting, boots shifting on planks, a match struck to light a cigarette, a whispered word that drifts upward into the star-pricked sky. You stand there, Johann Adler, Cooper's son, rifleman, a boy learning that in this place the frost does not only cling to boots and wire, it clings to the heart as well, and waits, for each man to understand just how cold a trench can truly be. The dawn comes sluggishly, dragging a heavy fog that sinks low over the trench and spills across no man's land like a shroud. You wake from a doze you barely remember falling into, boots still laced, rifle resting across your knees, where you sat back against the rough timber wall of the dugout. Beside you, Otto blinks at the pale light filtering through the gaps in the planks. His breath forms small, steady ghosts as he rubs his hands together for warmth that never seems to last. Emil crouches near the fire step, pencil scratching across the dog-eared page of a notebook he carries tucked inside his coat, safe from mud and damp. You watch him for a time. He pauses now and then, staring at the page as though the words might write themselves if he waits long enough. Then the pencil moves again, slow and careful, each letter pressed deep as if to anchor it against the wind and the guns. A call comes down the line for volunteers to carry rations from the supply dump behind the reserve trench. The sergeant's eyes settle on you and Otto, and there is no room to refuse. You sling your rifle, slip your pack back onto sore shoulders, and step up onto the narrow plank steps that lead to the sap, running back toward the village where the wagons wait. The path is little more than a shallow cut through churned frost and old shell holes patched over with boards and burlap sacks. Here and there, the ground holds footprints frozen like fossils, reminders of boots that once passed this way and did not return the same. When you reach the supply dump, it is nothing more than a cluster of tarpaulin sheets stretched between shattered farm buildings. Horses stand hobbled nearby, their sides steaming in the cold, breath rising like small campfires in the mist. An older corporal, his collar patched with mismatched wool, hands you sacks of bread, tins of bully beef, and fresh packets of tea leaves wrapped tight in oilskin. You sling the load over your shoulder until the strap bites deep, the weight a new ache to join the others you no longer count. On the path back, Otto trudges ahead of you, humming a tune you almost recognize. It is something from home, something about harvest dances and spring meadows, but it slips away before you can catch the words. He does not hum for long. The fog swallows even small songs here. Back in the trench, Emil waits near the bend, his pencil stub tucked behind one ear, the folded sheet of his new letter hidden in the breast of his coat. When you hand him his share of bread, he murmurs a soft thanks, eyes already far away again. He sits on a low crate beneath the sandbags, turning the envelope over in his hands as if weighing the words inside. Later, when the sky softens to a leaden midday gray, the word comes that tonight a small party will move up to the forward line. Not an attack, not yet, but a shift of fresh eyes and rifles to relieve another squad that has held too long under the drizzle of stray shells and sudden flares. The sergeant tells you 3 to be ready. Keep your kit light, he says. Leave behind anything that rattles or shines. Otto rolls his blanket tight and checks his boots for the 5th time, his fingers worrying at the laces until they lie neat and snug. Emil folds his letter once more and presses it flat against his knee. Before dusk, a runner passes through your trench. A boy not much older than Emil, boots splashed in old muck, breath ragged from miles run on narrow tracks that twist between artillery holes and splintered hedgerows. He takes the letter from Emil's hand without a word, tucks it inside his coat, and is gone again, boots drumming a faint rhythm that fades down the sap and into the fog. Emil stands a while longer, hand still hovering where the letter once was, as though he feels its shape pressed into his palm. You watch him from your seat near the parapet, the earth cool and damp against your back. Otto leans beside you, his helmet tipped low, humming that same unfinished tune. When the last light drains from the sky, the relief is ordered forward. You climb the narrow steps one by one, duck low beneath the wire strung like black veins above the trench lip. The world beyond the parapet is a different country. Wide and silent, except for the steady thud of distant guns that breathe in slow rhythm like a giant asleep in the cold earth. The squad moves in single file, boots finding what firm ground they can between puddles that shine faintly in the moon's thin light. Ahead, the forward trench lies half submerged in its own shadows, a crooked line of sandbags and broken stakes that mark the edge of the known world. The men you relieve stand waiting in that narrow ditch, their faces gaunt beneath helmets knocked askew, eyes hollow and rimmed with grime. They nod as you pass, stepping aside into the dark, boots sucking at the mud. Some carry fresh bandages wound tight around an arm or leg, spots of dark showing where the cloth has failed to hold the blood inside. You take their places, pressing shoulders against damp walls, rifles laid across sandbags slick with frost. Otto settles beside you, breathing through his mouth to keep his teeth from chattering too loud. Emil crouches at the corner fire step, scanning the wire for the flicker of a shadow that might be more than the wind. Above you, the sky is clear for the first time in days. The stars laid out so bright they feel almost close enough to touch. Yet the earth beneath your boots is heavy and cold, each heartbeat louder now in the hush between distant barrages. You think of Emil's letter, a scrap of paper now somewhere behind the line, maybe tucked in a courier's coat, maybe already passed to another boy bound for the rail siding where the last train waits in the dark. Maybe by now the ink is smeared by damp, or maybe it is safe in a sack with a dozen more, each word a small promise that not all things here are swallowed by the mud. You settle your hands around the rifle's stock and lay your cheek against the cold wood, your breath leaving faint frost on the sight. Somewhere ahead, the wire trembles softly in the wind. Behind you, the trench holds its breath. Ahead, the night waits. And between the two, you crouch. Johann Adler, Cooper's son, letter unwritten. Words waiting somewhere in your chest for a quiet that the guns will not grant you tonight. The night in the forward trench settles thick as tar, pressing close in every fold of your coat, every seam in your boots. Around you, the world is pared down to cold earth, the rasp of your own breath, and the shape of Otto's shoulder where he shifts now and then to keep the blood from freezing in his bones. Orders pass down the line in low voices. A listening post is needed. 2 men to crawl forward beyond the wire, belly to the frozen mud, ears sharp for the enemy's whisper or the cut of wire that means the line is about to tremble and break. The sergeant's eyes sweep the shallow trench, finding yours. Adler, Otto, you know how to keep quiet. Take your rifles. Take a flare. No shots unless you must. You do not argue. You do not want this task, yet you know refusing is not the shape of this life anymore. Otto nods once, presses his lips together in a thin line, and shifts his bayonet so it won't snag on the low stakes as you crawl. At the parapet, you sling your rifle across your back, the cold barrel biting through the thin wool of your coat. You climb over the lip where the sandbags dip, boots pressing softly into the frost. The wire gleams dull silver under a ragged moon, each barb tipped with black where old rags flutter like prayer flags for boys who no longer walk these lines. You drop to your knees first, then flat to your belly. The ground is a cold tongue against your chest, licking through the canvas of your coat. Otto moves beside you, elbows sinking in the muck as he pulls himself forward inch by inch. You do not speak. The only words are the hush of your coat dragging over grit and the shallow grunt of your breath when you push over a ridge of frozen soil. No man's land spreads before you, a shallow ocean of broken earth and wire, and the thin bones of trees blasted into splinters. In the dips and folds, shadows gather like waiting hands. Somewhere ahead, the enemy's wire waits too, a snarled wall that breathes men out and swallows them again when the flares go out. You crawl until the trench behind is only a low smudge of black against darker black. You and Otto press your bellies into a shallow dip where a shell once burst and left a ragged crater. From here, you watch and listen. The guns tonight are hushed, like beasts sleeping with one eye open. Now and then you catch the soft rattle of a wire strand tugged by wind, or something more. Otto inches closer until his sleeve brushes yours. His breath ghosts across your cheek, a small warmth that does not stay. He taps your elbow, then points ahead where the land folds up into a low rise crowned by stakes driven at odd angles. More wire, or maybe the bones of an old fence now lost to the churn of boots and shells. You strain your eyes. The night plays tricks here. Shapes crawl where there are none. A branch stirs in wind and becomes a helmeted head. A scrap of canvas caught on a barb flutters like a man's coat sleeve. Your heartbeat hammers against the frozen earth, a drum the enemy surely must hear. You hold your breath. Listen. There, soft and deliberate, the faint chink of metal on metal, a muffled curse cut short. Not the wind, not the wire rattling itself to sleep. Otto's hand tightens on your sleeve. His eyes, wide beneath his helmet's low rim, catch yours. You read the same question there that echoes behind your teeth. How close are they? How many? Do we slip back now, or wait and watch until we know if the night holds a whisper or a storm? A flare blooms far to your left, greenish and sickly, drifting up with a hiss before bursting into harsh daylight that washes the broken land in terrible clarity. In its brief glare, you see them. Two shapes low against the enemy wire, cutters glinting, shoulders hunched like wolves sniffing at a fence line. For a heartbeat, they freeze in the cruel glow, faces pale ghosts beneath rimmed helmets, then they vanish back into black as the flare sputters out. Beside you, Otto shifts, his hand hovering over the rifle at his belly. You lay your palm across his wrist. No shots. Not here. Not yet. The sergeant's order hangs between you and the frost. Listen, mark, return. You carry news, not bullets. The night closes in again, thick as wool pulled over your head. You feel every inch of earth between this hole and the safety of your trench. If they press forward now, you will hear them before you see them. The cut of wire, the grunt of breath, boots slipping in the muck. But the line holds its breath. The enemy shapes do not come. Perhaps they saw the flare and slipped back to wait for another night, another chance to probe the soft edge of your line. Otto leans close, mouth to your ear. Back. You nod. Inch by inch, you drag your belly from the crater's lip, boots finding the frozen ruts left by others before you. The wire hisses softly where you brush past, a song that claws at your sleeves and helmet strap. You drop back into the trench with a soft thud, boots striking the duckboard, breath coming so hard you taste blood where your tongue has cracked in the cold. Otto slumps beside you, helmet knocked askew, eyes wide but clear. The sergeant kneels before you. You speak the words simply, 2 men wire cut, maybe more behind. A probe, not a push, not yet. The sergeant nods once, grips your shoulder in a hand crusted with old mud. He says nothing more. There are no medals for crawling in the dark and returning with nothing but the truth that tomorrow the line will hold, or tremble, or break, or bite back when the wire sings again. You sink down onto the dugout's cold step, rifle across your knees. Otto's shoulder presses yours, and for a moment you feel the heat of life still humming beneath coats stiff with frost. Somewhere behind you, Emil's letter drifts in your thoughts. A promise that beyond this ragged edge of the earth, words still wait for the chance to be sent home, carried by boots that return, by boys who crawl out and crawl back again under the hush of a watching moon. The next day dawns with a pale drizzle that seeps into every fold of your coat and creeps down the back of your neck. There is no real rain, only the endless mist that turns mud to paste and fills the trench with a slow, sucking heaviness that clings to your boots and makes every step a burden. You wake stiff and half sore from where you slept upright against the dugout wall, rifle resting across your knees. Otto sits opposite, chin tucked to his chest, his breath fogging the cold air in short, steady bursts. Emil is awake too, his back pressed to the wall near the narrow entrance, eyes fixed on the gray slit of sky above the parapet. Somewhere down the line, a machine gun rattles in quick, nervous bursts, then stops. The sound rolls through the trench like an echo trapped between walls of earth and timber. The sergeant moves among the dugouts, boots squelching in the muck. He carries the smell of pipe smoke and wet wool, and when he passes, the squad straightens a little, if only to remind themselves they are still soldiers and not lumps of mud half buried in a ditch. Breakfast is ladled from a dented pot balanced on a makeshift brazier, gray porridge that tastes of ashes and salt. You eat it crouched on an upturned ammo box, spoon scraping tin. Otto mutters about his mother's rye bread and warm milk, fresh from the family's old cow, but the words slip away into the drizzle, lost as soon as they are spoken. When the meal is done, work begins. A section of the trench wall has slumped in the night, pulled down by the steady weight of rain and the tremor of distant shells. You and Emil are set to shovel duty, boots braced in ankle-deep sludge as you lift one sodden spadeful after another onto fresh sandbags. Each scoop drags at your arms, cold mud sliding down your sleeves, dripping from your elbows. Now and then you pause to listen. The hush of the drizzle, broken by the low talk of other squads, the rattle of a rat somewhere behind the duckboards, the faint thump of artillery far off where the line bends and snarls in its endless clawing at the enemy's wire. Between shovelfuls, Emil glances at you, his mouth half open as if to speak. But he says nothing, only digs. The wet earth splashes your boots, soaks your socks until your toes feel like lumps of clay pressed inside cracked leather. When the trench wall is patched and the worst of the slump braced with fresh planks, the sergeant calls you to the narrow sap leading back to the rear line. A ration wagon has come through the shell-scarred path behind the reserves, dragging crates of biscuits and tins of meat you will choke down later, if the shells don't find them first. You help unload the crates in the shallow dusk that passes for noon. The mule that pulls the wagon is spattered with mud to its flanks, eyes half shut as if it too has given up waiting for the sun. The teamster, a thin man with a battered cap and a bandage across his chin, talks to no one. He only lifts the boxes and nods when they vanish from the wagon bed, his boots already turning to leave before the last crate lands in the muck. Back in the trench, Otto has found a quiet place to sit. A ledge of dry plank beneath a sagging tarpaulin where a lantern flickers weakly. You drop beside him, your back pressed to the cold boards, your knees pulled tight to your chest. He tells you of a festival from summers ago, when the orchard behind his father's barn was lit with lanterns hung from apple boughs, when a girl in a blue dress laughed as he spun her across the dusty yard. He does not say her name. He does not have to. Her shape hangs between his words like the smoke drifting from the lantern's low flame. Emil listens too, squatting a few feet away, his arms draped across his knees. In his pocket rests another letter, its edges already softened by damp. He has not given it to a runner yet. He reads it to himself sometimes, moving his lips soundlessly, as if the words can tie him back to a place where the trench is only a story told by old men who never saw how deep the mud can truly drown a man's steps. Somewhere above, a flare spits and pops, its glow washing the parapet in stark white. For a breath, you see the wire glinting wet beyond the sandbags, the churned earth cratered and cracked. Then darkness folds over it all again. When dusk comes proper, the rain lifts just enough to let you hear the distant boom of shells along the horizon. The sergeant passes word that the squad will stand to again tonight, in case the enemy tries once more to test the wire. You check your rifle, running an oil rag over the bolt, fingers stiff and red with cold. Otto rubs warmth into his hands and tucks the photograph of his blue dress girl deeper into his breast pocket. Emil folds his letter flat and holds it a while, pressed between his palms like a prayer he does not trust the sky to carry home. In the last flicker of the lantern, you draw your coat close and rest your head against the rough timber. The trench walls lean in around you, slick with fresh damp that drips in slow taps onto your collar. You drift toward sleep with the taste of mud still on your tongue, your breath fogging the air in small ghosts that vanish into the hush between the guns. And somewhere just beyond the wire, in that broken country of churned earth and waiting shadows, tomorrow lies coiled like a question no shovel can bury, and no memory can keep wholly clean. The morning after the drizzle breaks cold and sharp, the sky stretched wide and pale above the trench like a sheet of tin beaten thin by a smith's hammer. Frost rims the top edge of the sandbags, crusting the mud walls with a brittle glitter that cracks and melts where the sun touches it, though the warmth never reaches your bones. You wake stiff, boots half frozen to the duckboards where you'd slept propped against Otto's shoulder. He still dozes beside you, his head tipped back against the planks, mouth parted slightly as he dreams of a place far from this ditch of wire and cold breath. The sergeant's whistle rouses everyone with its shrill bite. Boots scrape against mud, helmets knock against timber beams. Rifles are lifted and checked by numb fingers. You stand and stretch, joints popping like dry twigs. Emil crouches at the edge of the dugout, rolling his shoulders beneath his greatcoat, the letter still folded neat inside his breast pocket. Word comes down the trench like a ripple on water. Tonight there will be a raid. A small one, just enough to cut a gap in the enemy's wire, to test their sentries, to bring back any word of what lies hidden in the shallow folds beyond the frost-hardened field. You listen as the sergeant explains it twice, though no one asks him to repeat it. The plan is simple, the same plan every boy here learns by heart the moment the line settles into cold silence too long. A few will slip out under cover of dusk, crawl low through the wire, thrust forward to throw grenades at the shallow sap dugouts and crawl back if the guns allow. You and Otto are named for the party. Emil stays behind, his eyes flick to yours when he hears this, then drop to his boots. He says nothing, only fingers the scrap of paper in his pocket. The edge is smudged by oil and damp. All day the trench hums with the small noise of men preparing. Wire cutters are checked, grenades inspected and wrapped in rags to keep the pins from rattling. Faces are blackened with soot smudged from the brazier's iron lip. You practice hand signals in the shadow of the dugout wall. Halt, forward, back, spread. Words left behind because here, a careless syllable carries farther than any bullet. When the sun dips low behind a ragged drift of smoke that rises far off where the guns test their throats, you stand at the parapet with Otto beside you. The wire ahead gleams faintly in the dusk. The frost turns silver in the dying light. Somewhere beyond it, the enemy huddles in their own trench. Boys in coats no thicker than yours, boots no drier, breath no warmer. The corporal gives you the nod. One by one, you ease over the parapet, boots sinking softly into the frozen crust of no man's land. Your belly kisses the earth as you slide forward, elbows pushing you along like an insect tracing a groove through dirt and wire. Behind you, the trench fades to a darker smear in the gloom. Ahead, the wire looms, snarled strands and twisted stakes that snag at your sleeves. Otto moves to your left, his breath coming in soft bursts, hands steady on the small pair of cutters looped through his belt. At the wire's edge you pause, your breath loud in your ears. The frost bites through your gloves as you reach for the wire, feeling for tension. Otto slips closer, his shoulders pressed to yours as the cutters close with a soft, muffled snap. A strand parts. Another. Slow work. Every snip echoes in your mind like a rifle crack, though the world remains silent, save for the shallow hum of wind over open ground. When the gap is wide enough to crawl through, you slip forward again, boots dragging. The earth here is scarred with old shell holes, rimmed with frozen mud like broken teeth. You see shapes ahead, low mounds where the enemy's sap winds forward under the shield of barbed wire and winter's hush. The corporal signals halt. You press your body flat into the mud, cheek to the cold grit. Beside you, Otto shifts his pack and pulls the rag-wrapped grenade from his coat. The corporal lifts his hand. Wait, in the hush, you hear it. Boots, scraping wood, a faint clink of metal. A sentry? Or only a boy shivering as you do, thinking of home and heat and hands that do not smell of oil and frost? The corporal's hand snaps down. In one motion, the grenade is free, pin tugged with a soft click. Otto hefts it once, just once, then lobs it forward over the low rim of broken earth. You hear it land, a dull bump swallowed by the dirt. The blast is sharp, a sudden flash that burns the night in white light and red flame. The sound rolls over you and is gone. A cry rises, one voice, two, then silence again. The corporal's hand cuts back. Home. No shots, no glory, no trophies. Only the crawl back through the wire before the enemy guns remember to wake. You press through the gap, Otto behind you, the stink of fresh churned earth in your nostrils. Your heart slams against your ribs as the wire snags your coat sleeve, ripping cloth and skin. You do not stop. The trench mouth appears in the dark, like a promise. A low lip of sandbags waiting to swallow you back into the wet safety of timber and shadow. You drop over the parapet in a tangle of limbs and frost. Otto lands beside you, boots skidding on the duckboards. The corporal rolls over the edge last, his breath wheezing through clenched teeth. The sergeant waits just inside the dugout bend. He asks no questions yet. He only counts heads in the faint light of a single lantern, nods once when all return whole, more or less. Beyond the trench lip, the night holds its breath again. The enemy's search flares slow to rise, their rifles late to speak. Otto leans back against the dugout wall, a grin ghosting across his face though his hands tremble as he wipes mud from his cheek. You rest beside him, your sleeve torn, the cut beneath already weeping warm blood that feels almost welcome in this frozen place. In the hush that follows, you think of the boy whose boots scraped wood in the dark, the boy who maybe still lies in the shallow sap where the blast found him. A boy not so different than you, whose mother's letters might lie folded somewhere warm, waiting for a hand that will not hold them again. And so the trench hums quiet once more. The same mud, the same wire, the same frost, stitched now with the memory of a single flare, and a breathless crawl through a world too narrow for mercy, and too wide for any boy to cross and return unchanged. Morning comes uneasy, stitched together by half-sleep and the bitter taste of cold tea poured from a dented tin. The trench, for a few hours, lies strangely still, as if both sides have agreed to let the frost bind the earth tighter around them for a while. You sit near the dugout entrance, rifle across your lap, coat pulled tight around your shoulders. Otto rests with his head tipped back against the timber wall, mouth slightly open, snoring softly in broken gasps that sound almost like laughter if you close your eyes. After the raid, the sergeant let you rest without a word, only nodding when you stumbled past him, your sleeves torn and your hands raw with mud and wire cuts. Now the weight of that night clings to you more than the chill ever could. The memory of the blast sits behind your ribs like a stone you cannot shift. Somewhere near the bend in the trench, Emil crouches with his notebook again, the pencil worn down to a stub no longer than his thumb. He writes with his knees drawn up beneath his coat, hat pulled low, his breath a small cloud that drifts and vanishes in the still air. Now and then he glances at you and Otto, then back to his page, as if to anchor himself in the shape of your faces before the next word comes. Rations arrive late, carried by a fresh pair of lads from the rear line, boys with cheeks still round from home kitchens, their boots only lightly stained by the trench mud. They hand out bread so stale it cracks at the edges, wedges of hard cheese that taste faintly of salt and something older. You chew slowly, the crust scraping your gums, but you say nothing because hunger has learned to ask for little here. Near midday, the frost softens just enough to turn the duckboards slick. You and Otto are ordered to stand watch at a shallow bend where the trench shoulders into a bank of packed earth and half-rotten sandbags. There, the parapet dips, giving a narrow view across no man's land, where the wire glints in knots and broken curls. Otto hums under his breath, the same half-forgotten tune he always returns to when the hush grows too wide. You do not know the words. Maybe he does not either. Maybe they are better left in that orchard behind his father's barn, still hanging in the warm air between the lanterns and the dust rising from dancing boots. You peer through a gap in the sandbags. The land beyond is frozen hard, broken only by the soft drift of smoke far off where the enemy's fires burn low. Now and then a shape moves, a head ducked quickly behind a parapet, the brief flicker of a shovel turning earth where new cover must be raised before the next thaw. The sergeant joins you for a while, his pipe clamped between teeth yellowed by years of poor tobacco and colder nights than these. He squints through the gap, his breath drifting in the same thin stream as the smoke curling from the bowl of his pipe. "You did well last night," he says at last, his voice low so it does not carry along the trench. "Both of you. Quick and quiet. That's all the Kaiser asks of you. For now." You nod once. Otto shrugs, but the grin he offers is thin and tired. Behind you, Emil shifts near the fire step. He catches your eye, lifts his chin slightly as if to ask whether your hands still shake. You glance down, they do, but only just. Enough to remind you that you're still here, still holding the line where the wire sags under frost, and the mud remembers every boot that passes through it. When the sergeant moves on, Otto leans closer, voice barely above the soft scrape of wind along the sandbags. "Think they'll come tonight?" he asks. You shake your head because it feels safer than saying yes. Safer than saying no. The truth is you don't know. No one does. The wire listens for you just as you listen for it. For the soft clink of cutters, the slip of boots, the sudden hush that falls when men decide to crawl forward. Afternoon drags on in slow inches. The clouds gather in a low gray blanket that promises snow before dawn if the wind shifts. Small sounds keep you anchored. The tap of Emil's pencil, the drip of thawed frost from the trench lip, the distant clatter of wagons moving along the rear line to bring up more shells you pray you won't need. When dusk edges closer, the sergeant calls for a pair of lanterns to be lit, carefully shielded so the glow does not spill over the parapet. You and Otto crouch by one, knees brushing as you check your rifles again, oiling the bolts with slow, deliberate strokes. The lantern's light dances on the metal, catching on the fresh nicks in the stock where wire bit deep during the crawl. Near your boots, Emil folds his latest letter into a neat square. This time he presses it to his lips before tucking it into his coat. He does not speak it aloud, nor do you ask what it says. Words feel too fragile here. Better that they stay hidden, safe beneath wool and buttons, carried close to the heart in case the wire calls for more than you wish to give. As the last light drains from the sky, you settle your helmet low on your brow. Beyond the trench, the frost waits for footsteps. The wire waits for trembling hands. And you, Johann Adler, Cooper's son, mud-caked rifleman, you wait with them, caught between a silence that hums like memory and a darkness that promises to swallow every word left unspoken by the time dawn comes again. Night comes as a hush rather than a roar, settling low and heavy over the trench. The lanterns are snuffed before they can draw too many eyes, their glow replaced by the flicker of a match here and there. A spark to light a cigarette that's cupped quick and hidden by gloved hands. You crouch with Otto at the fire step, backs pressed against the damp wall of sandbags. The frost has returned, harder than the night before, binding the mud beneath your boots into a crust that cracks when you shift your weight. Now and then the wind slips through the wire, carrying a rattle that might be a scrap of old cloth or something more. The sergeant passes word down the line in a whisper that brushes your ear like a ghost. Keep sharp. They'll test us before the snow comes. No orders beyond that, just the promise that the wire listens and that the darkness is never empty for long. You glance at Otto. He hums again under his breath, quieter than usual. His breath fogs in the air, drifts out through the firing slit and vanishes above the jagged black teeth of the wire. Emil sits a short way down the trench, pressed into the crook where two walls meet. His eyes are wide and bright in the low gloom, the folded letter hidden in his coat like a secret that might keep him warm if the frost fails him. The hours slip by slow. You drift in and out of wakefulness, cheek pressed to your sleeve, one hand always curled around the rifle's cold stock. Somewhere behind you, a corporal clears his throat, boots scraping on duckboards slick with ice. A shovel clinks against a crate as a boy settles fresh earth into a sagging parapet. Then, it comes. Not the thunder of a barrage, not yet. Only the faintest snap. Wire parted by careful hands. The scrape of boots that do not belong to rats or dogs or the wind. Your heart hammers once, twice, then settles into the same rhythm as your breath. Shallow, steady. The way the sergeant taught you when he pressed a hand to your shoulder and whispered that the best shot is the one who remembers his lungs. A flare pops somewhere down the line. Not yours, but theirs. A sickly light that floats up, bathes no man's land in a quick, cruel glow. In its brief bloom, you see them. Shapes low against the churned earth, heads down, rifles strapped across shoulders so their hands can crawl and cut. Shadows that look like boys in gray and boys in blue. Only the wire between them keeps the uniforms straight in your mind. Otto mutters a curse through clenched teeth, his fingers tight on the rifle's guard. Beside him, Emil shifts, his boots tapping the duckboard in a nervous stutter. The sergeant appears as if from the mud itself, a hand pressed flat in the dark. Wait, not yet. Let them come close enough to see their breath in the flare's last flicker. Close enough that the wire will fight them back if you fail to. The shapes drift nearer, brushing the lowest strands. You hear the soft clink of metal against frozen steel. A muttered word, not German, sharp and clipped, carried on a breath that hangs white above a helmet's rim. The sergeant's hand lifts. The signal. Your shoulder presses into the firing step, the rifle sight, finding a shape that does not wear your uniform. The first shot cracks like a whip. Otto's or yours, you do not know. Another follows, Emil's perhaps. And then the hush unravels all at once into the snap and cough of rifles finding their mark. The flare sputters out, plunging the world back into a darkness broken only by muzzle flashes and the sudden cries that rise and fall like torn cloth on the wind. The enemy shapes recoil, some falling hard into the wire, others vanishing back into the folds and dips where the frost hides their retreat. Someone yells for more flares. A runner stumbles past you, boots slipping on duckboards glazed with ice. The sergeant's voice cuts through the rattle of shots. Hold your fire! Steady! You press your cheek to the stock, breath hissing through your teeth. The cold bites the edge of your collar where sweat has gathered and begun to freeze. Otto reloads beside you, his fingers clumsy but sure, lips moving in a prayer you cannot hear over the hush that has fallen again as suddenly as the gunfire rose. When it is done, when the last echo rolls off through the ragged spines of blasted trees beyond no man's land, you lift your head. The wire holds. The trench holds. The shapes have melted into the frost, leaving only dark smears on the churned earth where the flare's brief light showed them crawling forward and falling back. Emil crouches with his back to the sandbags, the rifle across his knees, the tip of his boot tapping slow and steady against the frozen board. His eyes find yours in the dark, wide and bright, and older somehow than they were before the wire rattled with footsteps and the rifle spoke back. The sergeant pats Otto's shoulder once as he passes. His voice drifts behind him, low and tired. Good lads. Sleep if you can. You lean your head against the wall, the rifle still warm beneath your glove. Otto rests beside you, one knee drawn up, his breath a small cloud that fades into the broken night. Emil sits just close enough that you hear the quiet rustle of the letter in his coat as he shifts to find a more comfortable piece of wall. Above, the sky bruises purple where the clouds gather, heavy with the promise of snow before dawn. Somewhere out there, the wire waits to sing again. The frost waits to drink more names into the mud. And you, Johann Adler, you breathe slow and even, eyes half closed. A boy no longer dreaming of barrels and orchard dances, but of a stretch of dark earth that has already learned too many ways to remember the shape of your boots. When the first flakes drift down before dawn, they come gentle as ash, catching on the rim of your helmet, the folds of your coat, the rough weave of the sandbags that line the parapet. You sit with your back to the trench wall, knees drawn to your chest, rifle resting across your lap, muzzle pointed toward the duckboards slick with half-frozen grime. Otto sits beside you, head tipped back to catch the falling flakes on his lashes. Now and then, he closes his eyes and lets them melt, a small mercy that reminds you both, that not all things here are made of wire and mud and steel. Beyond the parapet, no man's land lies quiet under the thin white drift, as if the world itself has drawn a blanket over its scars. In the half-light, the wire looks softer somehow, its barbs muted where frost and snow cling in tiny crystals that catch the dawn's hesitant glow. Emil stands near the bend in the trench where the sap angles toward the rear line. He holds his letter in both hands now, unfolded and worn at the creases. His lips move as he reads the words back to himself, though no sound reaches you. Maybe he whispers the shape of home into the cold to remind the frost that you were not born here in the mud. The sergeant's boots crunch on the duckboards as he passes, a quiet nod, A grunt that might be approval, or only an old man's knees reminding him that the cold finds every crack in bone and skin alike. He tells you there will be no push today, no wire cutting, no crawling through the churned earth to toss grenades into the sap. The snow buys you a day, maybe two. Enough for the lines to sit and listen to each other breathe through the hush. You trade your post with Otto long enough to fetch a cup of black tea from the brazier at the dugout mouth. It tastes of ash and iron, but it warms your throat for a heartbeat, and that is enough. When you return, Otto hums again, that half-song you still cannot name. His eyes drift shut, boots planted firm on the slick boards as if sleep might carry him upright through the pale drift settling over the trench. Nearby, Emil lowers his letter, folds it, tucks it deep in the breast of his coat. He catches you watching him and offers a small shrug, as if to say, "It is enough to keep the words close, even if the runner never comes." By midday, the snow thickens. It creeps into the trench, softening edges, muffling the scrape of boots and the rustle of greatcoats. You press your back deeper into the earth wall and watch as the wire sags under the gathering weight. No shots crack the silence today. No shells tear the thin sky open. Even the distant boom of the guns falls off, a memory muffled by the hush of falling white. In this stolen quiet, the boys of your squad find small comforts where they can. Otto fishes a scrap of paper from his pocket, creases worn nearly through, and sketches shapes with the stub of a pencil. An orchard fence, a small house with smoke curling from its chimney, a tree heavy with apples that will not grow here no matter how deep the roots dig into the trench floor. Emil hums under his breath now too, picking up Otto's broken tune and weaving it into something new, something softer than the wind that slips over the parapet and settles frost along your collar. When the sun slips behind the bruised clouds, the trench gathers what warmth it can. The sergeant calls you to the dugout mouth, counts heads in the soft lantern glow, reads out the names as if reminding the frost who still stands watch tonight. When he reaches your name, Johann Adler, his eyes linger a moment, sharp but kind in their own rough way. He nods once, satisfied, then moves on. You lie down when darkness gathers, boots still on, rifle beside you where your hand finds it by feel. Otto curls on his side, knees tucked up. The pencil tucked behind his ear like a promise that tomorrow he will finish the orchard fence, the crooked barn, the wide tree where the girl in the blue dress waits with her back turned to this whole frozen ruin. Emil drifts to sleep still holding the letter in his coat. Once you see his fingers brush it through the wool, a soft tap-tap like a heartbeat, or a knock on a door that might yet open when this frost lifts and spring finds your father's barrels waiting to be bound and filled. Above you, the snow falls quiet. No man's land rests beneath its blanket, the wire hidden for a few merciful hours. You breathe deep the sharp scent of frost and damp earth, and for the first time in weeks the air carries no smoke, no powder, only the hush of winter drawing a thin veil over the restless line. In that hush you sleep, Johann Adler, Cooper's son, rifleman, keeper of a scrap of peace bought not by the gun but by the sky itself, drifting down in small white miracles that bind the mud and wire and fear, in a silence too gentle to last but enough to remind you that somewhere under all this ruin, the earth still remembers how to sleep. When the snow holds through the night, and for a while it feels as though the front itself has forgotten how to growl. You wake to find the trench transformed under a thick white crust, the mud hidden beneath a blanket that smooths every rough edge, every cratered corner where boots have ground the earth to ruin. You stand at the parapet with Otto at your shoulder. He leans forward just enough to peer over the sandbags, the frost rhyming the tip of his helmet where his breath escapes in quiet clouds. Beyond the wire, no man's land lies still. A barren garden hushed beneath a fresh fall that makes even the barbs look soft, silvered under the pale wash of a sky not yet ready to give you the sun. Emil crouches a few paces back, coat drawn tight, hands pressed around a mess tin that steams faintly in the dawn. He offers you a sip, weak tea that tastes of metal and smoke, but warms your tongue and settles the cold that crept into your ribs during the long night. Word drifts down the line from a corporal with a voice so hoarse it sounds scraped raw. A truce might hold for another day if the frost stays deep, if the snow keeps falling, if the guns do not remember their thirst for thunder. You nod, but say nothing. You have learned by now that the front line keeps no promises, that the wire cannot tear open again. Near midday, the clouds break just enough to let through a smear of watery light. You and Otto crouch at the firing step to mend a split in the parapet, where rain and shells long past have eaten away the sandbags. Your gloves stick to the frozen burlap, your breath hissing through your teeth each time you press your palm to steady a fresh sack. Otto works beside you in silence, his shoulders moving in steady rhythm, his mouth drawn tight against the cold that has settled in his jaw. When the work is done, you sit side by side on a plank just inside the dugout. Otto pulls the scrap of paper from his pocket, the orchard sketch, now smudged at the corners, the pencil lines blurred where his thumb has rubbed them smooth in the dark. He shows you what he's added. The faint curve of a girl's dress caught by a breeze that does not blow here, a rough scribble of apples hanging low enough to touch. "It's nearly done," he says, voice soft as the frost that drifts from the lip of the dugout roof. "When we get leave, I'll show her. Tell her I kept it safe." You nod because it is the only answer that does not taste of lies. You want to believe him. You want to believe in orchards in spring, in barrels waiting in your father's shed, in letters that find their way home. For a moment, the hum of the front line fades beneath the hush of snow settling gently along the trench lip. But the front remembers itself before dusk. It begins with a shell, somewhere far down the line, the dull thump of an artillery piece that spits its iron seed into the hush. The sound rolls low across the frozen plain, a growl you feel in your boots and your teeth. Another follows, closer this time. You and Otto lift your heads as one, eyes meeting across the gap where the orchard lives on a scrap of paper, no thicker than a promise. Emil stands at the dugout mouth, the letter pressed flat to his chest beneath his coat. His lips move, though you hear no words. Maybe he prays. Maybe he counts heartbeats in the hope they will outrun the shells. The next blast lands close enough to shake dirt from the rafters overhead. Bits of frost and mud patter down onto your shoulders. The sergeant's boots crunch on the duckboards, his voice a bark that snaps the squad to readiness. Rifles checked, bayonets strapped tight, helmets squared against brows. No longer orchard dreamers now, only soldiers again, each breath measured in the slow hush between barrages. When the shelling pauses, you crawl to the fire step. The parapet gleams with fresh snow, pocked now by sharp new craters where earth and frost have fused under iron. Beyond the wire, the land is no longer soft, churned again by the teeth of a world that remembers no mercy. Otto crouches beside you, his breath ragged. You catch his eye, and he tries a smile. It flickers and dies when the next shell lands, farther off, but you know its cousins are coming closer. The sergeant's hand clamps your shoulder. Hold steady, his eyes say when his voice fails beneath the distant thunder. When they come, hold. You nod, your rifle warm beneath your palm where the oil has clung to the steel. Beside you, Emil pulls his letter free, presses it once more to his lips, as if to seal it with the breath he might not get to give tomorrow. Then he tucks it deep again, shoulders squared as he lowers his helmet and fixes his gaze on the wire, the ragged line where the frost drips now, where the ghosts of boys in blue or gray might appear through the drifting snow when the whistle calls. And so you wait again, Johann Adler, Cooper's son, rifleman in the hush that will not hold. The orchard sketch lies folded in Otto's pocket, the letter warm beneath Emil's coat, the memory of silence trapped beneath the fresh snow that will soon be trampled under boots and barbed steel. Above, the sky closes its gray lid once more. Around you, the frost holds its breath as the line learns, once again, that the quiet is never truly yours to keep.